So before we get into the session, the formal part of the session, here's a big shout out to, I would say, the masters of human transformation, or what I would say evolution, Charles Darwin and Lamarck. So that's where our syllabus still remains relevant to us across generations. So we have seen the resilience and the strength and the tenacity of the human spirit being played out, literally the way it was done when the Big Bang happened. We had our own Big Bang. So we saw survival of the fittest, adaptability, and then, for better or for worse, the use and disuse theory playing itself out. As a species, it's not just this generational diversity, the various silos that we created. We've experienced something which we probably never even expected. With all the digital transformation, innovation, creativity, we never expected to face this kind of, you could say, triggered externally, where we had no choice, no place at the table to change ourselves and transform ourselves. So given that, we had to break certain hard lines which said that work life and personal life have to be absolutely siloed, distinct, separate. We had to go back. That was the only strategy, the survival strategy, as Darwin put it, where we had to go. The only strategy was to take work into the most private and personal space, which is our home. Yeah. And now that the dust seems to be settling, the expectations seem to have reversed. We want our workforce, we want people to come back to the brick and mortar structure of our offices. How is this going to play out? Because the very office that we left is not the same office that we're coming back to. We have veterans who have experienced company culture hands-on, who are now having to meet colleagues who are completely digital personalities thanks to the massive recruitment that happened virtually. And then we ourselves have changed. Very low-hanging soft skills like social intelligence, etiquette, even dress code have been in hibernation for almost 3 years. And it's now getting rather painful waking up to going back into that sensitivity. So how is this going to play out? Are there any straight answers? Well, who is best positioned to answer this except the veterans who carry those battle scars, who are still on that field trying to recreate, trying to create something where there's no data or past experience and redefine a sustainable going forward, you could say, workspace. Since we're talking about work, I'm saying how are we going to manage a generation that seems to have evolved as a new species from within a species. So I would like to turn to both Sashi and Shailaja and have your take. How have you seen this evolutionary transformation actually playing out in your organization? I mean, what are the struggles that you faced, and how did you reach a certain approach? What are the realizations that you didn't imagine?
Got it. So I'll answer it from two lenses. One is the learnings that we had as an organization, and also the learnings that individuals had as employees. So for me, the learning as an organization, and I will talk from a silver lining or a positive lens, is it really helped the business think about resilience in a very deeper manner. And there were some age-old or closely held beliefs that certain things require physical proximity or in-person presence, and that got challenged. Like, for example, coming from tech, and if you are from sales function and you're doing value selling and selling business transformation or digital transformation, it was believed that you will have to connect with all the levels of the C-suite, have physical proximity or meetings, or the deals or engagements will be closed in a workshop format or oval golf courses or something like that. But in the pandemic, a lot of large deals got closed. Large outsourcing deals got closed, digital transformation deals got closed. Yes, digital thrust was there, but what it also made us do is organizations built assets and invested in functions that helped in communicating a narrative little differently. Like value engineering as a function really got built up. That how can you take data of an organization, simulate it and show value to the customers. Prototyping, demos, and building all those kind of narratives which virtually help a customer know that how their transformation will look like. I'll give you another example, let's say data centers. Data centers were called essential services during pandemic with 24/7 operations and had to be manned. And a lot of organizations, having data centers or providing data center services rose to the challenge, created lodging facilities for employees close to the data centers because shift had to run in a 24/7 manner. But at the same time, it made organizations think very deeply that is this sustainable? How can we run data centers without that? So you thought about can aspects of maintenance have predictability and predictivity so that outages can be planned a little differently and you're not manning in the same way and not having the shifts in this way. So the way I look at it is that it is a learning both from a business and even HR, be it onboarding, a lot of tech organizations got built up, that there are aspects of work which can be done digitally and you can get the same level of productivity and efficiency, and also realizing that some aspects require an in-person conversation. At an employee level, the learning was of awareness. Initially, it was more like, oh, we are working remotely, we have flexibility, but at the same time, there was this phase when the pandemic lasted more than a year, where employees, when we did surveys, we found that employees wanted to return to work and hybrid working was the most rated or opted in way of working.
So, we'll come back to that because you're getting into now the specifics, which I'm sure is going to be very interesting in how you have decided, is there coexistence of various other options? So, Shailendra, what has been your experience of, is it really evolution or is it disruption in terms of how we understand it? Because evolution is unidirectional, you can't go back, and it's also global.
Yeah. So, I would kind of, when I think about pandemic, we would look at it more as a disruption, and it basically went and made us question time-tested assumptions. It kind of said, oh, these things need to be done in office, now why can't these be done digitally or virtually? And we had to go back and kind of rethink the way we were organizing people, rethink structures, and so on and so forth. But having said that, I'm slowly going to start coming to the evolution part of it, because my firm is a young firm. We are rapidly growing. We think about expertise and things in different ways. So what we then realized is change is a constant. Technology is changing, world is becoming more uncertain. There are lots of shifts which are continuing to happen and will continue to happen. And therefore, in change being a constant, one of the things that we've started working as a management team is that we have adopted the fail fast. So we basically said in pandemic, we were geographically dispersed and we had people working from home. That worked at that moment because we had to make it work. Now, the learnings from that, of course, is what we were talking about a little while back, which is in terms of alignment of people to the in-situ way of working, alignment of people to the values and the way we deliver something, the value proposition. How would somebody intelligently talk about the value proposition of your organization if he's never come to your organization, right? So I think there were places where there were value gaps or EVP gaps that people were communicating, saying, oh, I didn't know that we had this. But the person who's been there with the organization for a longer period of time was able to intelligently talk about, oh, but there are these use cases that we've done in the past, etc. So with things that we had to, or we were doing well, there were some of those that we were not doing well on, if we had to continue the work from home. So at a fundamental level, to the point that Sachi was talking about, we went back to the drawing board and we said we have to look at hybrid. We have to retain the flexibility that was put on the table in the past, but there has to be a structure that has to evolve.
So you're saying it's not one way or the other. It's now going to be completely evolving.
And we will evolve with the mindset that at some point in time our aspiration is to go into 5-day. We are going to evolve and we are continuing to flex. So it's an evolution, and at every quarter we are trying new things. But it's a tweak, and we'll come to a phase where, right, so when we started the hybrid, we had 15 or 20%, then we had 40% footfall. And like I was just saying, we have about 85% footfall right now, right, for hybrid. And then we will kind of take it one notch level up. But the fundamental thing which was at risk is the value alignment. You know, the interpersonal relationships, the learning and apprenticeship, you know, kind of capability building methodologies. And that started becoming roadblocks for us to grow. So I think it pushed us to go back to the drawing board. So I think that's how I would put it.
So to summarize what both of you all have said, what I'm hearing is about culture, holistic culture, okay? Whether it's about project-related culture, organizational culture. There's this old adage, I don't know who said it or whether it just evolved, that culture is something that you can't teach, it has to be caught, right? But maybe in the context of your organizations, which is one is evolving organization, yours is, you know, can still become much bigger. We have organizations which went, you could say, wild in their virtual recruitment, who went to parts of the world and cities and villages where they have no intention, even in the future, of having their own offices. Now, if you're going to talk about hybrid workplace going to be, you know, where you have either the employee has all choice or the organization mandates it, how is it logically going to work out for somebody to attend office from some way out village, from some boondocks, and come to office 3 days a week? Now, what's the option lying in front? Do they relocate, which means is the organization going to support that? Or is exit the option? Is there anything that you all have thought of in that direction?
So
because that's something which companies are facing.
So Sadhna, I think like our topic is also a balancing act,
Yes.
right? So I don't think so it is one way
Or the highway.
or one size fit all kind of a model. And I do feel there is a need to marry the needs of your workforce with the business model needs of your organization or the state of maturity that you're in, right? So for example, there are certain operations that can be done completely remotely. And the way I look at it is that we have an opportunity as business to think of different combinations of work models and suit it to the needs of our different functions or our organization as a whole. So, so if you have, like I can talk about Waymo. We are like a startup. Much of our hiring or most of our hiring had happened during pandemic, and we do realize culture is a big differentiator, and we are at a stage where interdepartmental synergy is really, really important, and so to that extent hybrid working is the model that we went for. But if there are teams within your organization which can deliver efficiently, productively, and you are at a stage of maturity that you feel you have managers who are capable to provide that direction and manage that workforce, then you can choose a different model. But I really feel the trump card here is balancing and intentionality. Like it is not like move this way or move completely that way. Right? If there are certain organizations that have taken a call of complete 5-day working and they know it comes at a risk of attrition, because at the phase that they are in, that's the most important aspect that they can do. Or I talked about operations that need to be 24/7. So
yeah. Do you think there was an area that we didn't think of this?
No, I think that let me put it in kind of two different ways, and I completely agree with Sachi, where see, the point is that at an there's one part of it is the organization construct, and second is the people. Yeah. In the organization construct, you basically have, to her point, there are specific, kind of workflows which are repeatable, and can be done remotely. But there are going to be others which require in-person, highly interactive conversation, problem solving, working on whiteboards, building out histories. So that's one part. And therefore you need to balance and take a call. And there are some people who are genuinely tenured, maybe architects, who can actually deliver value remotely, and they come for specific aspects of the workflow. For them, they've already been there and done that. You can choose to give them that flexibility, but it's very targeted. So the remote work program has to kind of work closely with having people in office. So that's one part. The second part, I have also, kind of been looking at the fact that your employee social network or your organization network now needs to consist of multiple people. Like you have specific, set of people who are operating with you on gigs. There are some people who are remote workers, there are some people in the office, and there are some people who are a part of your vendor organization. All of them now are a part of your network. Yeah. And the fact is that the new construct now needs to take all of them and connect them and align them to what we need to do differently. So when you kind of start talking about diversity, this is diversity. And it's not about age, or it's not about gender, because I think that's passé. And people should stop talking about gender and age. I think it's about work, the expertise that you need to do, you need to deliver that work. And what is the kind of work construct or framework that you will provide, which is going to make that person successful and grow, right? So I think you had something where you talked about growth.
Yeah, so actually what you all have said, and I think the audience may agree, I'm playing the devil's advocate here, has been the basic premise all through, aligning our people to our vision, our strategy. But we had to then create a strategy which didn't exist. Yeah. And we were thinking on our feet, we didn't know the repercussions of that strategy. Like I said, the two of you all are probably in a much better place than a lot of the tried and tested institutions they've gone beyond being organizations. Yeah. They are facing a challenge. It is not just about a few people or a few architects and aligning them. What are they going to do with that large virtual employee group? And here, interestingly, and in alignment with what you said, when we talk about diversity or generational diversity, none of that was actually evident during the virtual hiring. Gender didn't matter. PWDs didn't matter. We just hired. It was. I think that was a great level playing field. But we are now back into another challenge, and that is something which I repeatedly hear from organizations. How do they? There is a statutory challenge because you have people, you're not registered in that place. It worked as remote workers. So what is the messaging that finally goes out that is going to come and haunt us? Was this an audition which we are taking as a finale? So we cannot now afford to repeat those knee-jerk reactions that we've made thus far. And I'm asking you to think holistically, think of those large enterprises. So, what would you do in their place?
I think the way I look at it is, to me, intentionality and clarity is really, really important, right? There was a situation, a trigger, and organizations responded to it very differently. Some did it in a more long-term way. That is this a model that can be reversed or not reversed, and what does it mean for us? Some organizations responded in that moment, and rightfully so, because they had a surge of demand and they had to immediately put an operating model that could respond to it. But I think we're still at a point where you can think for what that model means for you in the next 5 years, 6 years, or whatever that is, and create supporting mechanisms that work for your organization and a long-term operational model, right? The other part I will say is we should stop assuming things. What I mean by that is, like, there's this feeling that all employees want, sorry, it has dropped, okay, sorry. It's going with the nasscom tag. Okay, so I think the point I was making was that we have to stop assuming things, that all employees want flexibility or all employees want to come from home, or I think we have now with tech very deep listening tools, and we can create persona based solutions. Like, for example, I was talking about myself. I have 2 daughters, the older one is 10th, I have a dependent ailing mother, and one would assume, oh, this is the kind of a person who will really thrive with flexible working, but I was yearning to go back to work. Like, and when we did design thinking in our organization, and we try to say what is the personas that we have in our organization, we realize that there is no one size fit all again, right? Yeah. And what kind of work arrangements people want, or even assuming that a person of a certain age and a certain group will want something, women will want something, and a younger workforce will want something else. That these are all examples of attribution bias, and we should listen to our employees and develop solutions that work for them. So I'll just hand it to...
No, absolutely. I think, you know, kind of, Sachi is correct. You know, if I were to kind of give, you know, a little bit of a frame, I would actually say that first is that our employment contracts are woefully under thought through. You know, we just haven't factored evolution into it. Right. It's the same terms and conditions. And I mean, recently I was talking to my CNB head and I said, put in some, you know, kind of locational comp changes. What do you think needs to come in there? And then, you know, the entire team went away, and even for the past 1 month, I haven't heard back from them. But the point is that employment contracts have to be different. Number two, and we talked about that, you know, in our discussions, our performance metrics, you know, are still very, very traditional.
Organization driven.
Organization driven, KPI driven. Maybe there need to be different OKRs for different personas, yes. You know, and I think that which is going to make them thrive, you know, and I think that we, again, have not thought about it. The third part, I would also say is, you know, we're taking one step in that direction in terms of performance management where, or career growth, where we are telling people, build your own JD. Okay, there are so many roles, where do you want to go next, etc. But at a very, very fundamental level, from a career growth perspective, the tracks that potentially can be for different people. Somebody may want to stay at a certain level and do great work and get remunerated for it and doesn't want to take on a team. Somebody who wants to do just gig and move from project to project. And I mean, we've not, from an HR point of view, we've not thought about career tracks which could be almost a mix and match or flexible or
the onus shifting to the employee?
Yes, you know, like a cafeteria or a buffet system where people can actually go and pick what they want. I don't think we've thought about those frameworks. And that is the evolution that needs to happen, you know, but it's still work in progress.
I hear you, but you know, maybe we are thinking of what we have been used to. I'm talking of even in the India context. But if you look at it, let's look at the US, which is where we have a lot of our customers, right? The largest, I'm actually going to be contradicting myself, the largest of the organizations, the well-established 100-year plus companies, they've done away with the office concept. Office is where you go when you need a physical presence, you need meetings with clients, maybe an experiential visit, customer visit. We have not adopted that. We have still remained largely within the four walls of a structure till we were forced to go out into this virtual, and maybe that's the challenge we're facing. So we do have some examples of what's working, and there's this, the economy, I mean, we probably will surpass them hopefully, but what is the takeaway we have? Why is it that we never thought in that direction? And why is it, why do you think it doesn't work?
I would, you know, I would give a different take. So the fact is that I have offices on the West Coast and East Coast. I'm working with clients in US. One of the things that I've consistently started hearing from them is that productivity has dripped to, you know, 5 hours. And a lot of them are actually talking to me as an India business head in terms of what can you build out for us in India, because at this point in time, I can't get my employees back, so maybe I need to outsource. And this is a trend that's going to happen because US is struggling with productivity. And while the geographically dispersed workforce is fantastic and all of that has happened, what they've actually realized is some of that connective tissue has become a problem. So that's why you have Satya and Elon and others writing messages saying, I want people to be turning up in office. You know, they're actually writing emails and WhatsApp messages on this because they've realized that if they have to get ahead of the curve with all the slowdown which is happening, they will either have to do something differently or kind of send work outside of India, outside of US. It is a challenge. So I'm actually saying that we should learn from that and not swing to that extreme, but I think that we should take the best of what we can learn and build that in our existing framework, because our strength right now is actually the thinking and the productivity, etc. But there are also firms in Europe and US which are doing fantastically, but they've gone into an art form where they actually work really well like that. So I think that it's an evolution, I think.
So The way I will look at it, Sadhana, is I think organizations today have to explain why you need to come to work.
I think that messaging.
And let's not underestimate it. And when I say explain, not because you come because of culture or some things like that, but also support it with actions. So if you're giving work to people in a very traditional way, or like just allocating it through a system and they have to work remotely and do it, and just to deliver that same work sitting in office in a cabin, the employee is going to ask, why am I doing this? Why I can't go back and do it from my home, right? So it's more about creating those experiences, those moments that support your decision. Right? So if you're asking employees to come and you want, because there has to be creative problem solving that needs to happen, then that agenda needs to be managed, it needs to be created. If you're wanting employees to come because you want to have a culture emulation, then you need to have your leaders in the office. They need to walk the talk, talk about values, talk about culture, talk about how decisions are made, create moments where people are learning from that live experience. Oh, this is a very important decision that has been made, or this is how we are making a decision for a customer. So I think again, going back, we have to respect the fact that we have to explain why you have to come to work.
So these are great wish lists, but tell me, and I'm coming from a place of being now an executive coach, okay? I work with leaders, right? One of the very rare asks is about followership. They ask about everything else, executive presence, leadership impact, charisma, gravitas. But what you're talking actually results in individual level impact on teams. What can cause a person to come back to work if you take off the organization name? It's finally how they relate to the other people,
Absolutely,
right?
How they relate to the managers, how they relate to leaders.
But that's been largely HR driven, right? How do you, I don't know whether any organization has really, it's measured, yes, at the manager level. You measure it through attrition, you measure through your leadership impact, but those are scores which again make it very transactional. I really don't know how organizations are transforming their culture to be more creating followership, which will then allow all the other things to fall in place.
So I think I can answer from the lens of how I have seen it play, be it in my prior organization or at Waymo. I think the hook is customer centricity. So what I mean by that is that are you bringing employees closer to customer problems? And in that context of a customer problem, explaining how you as an organization are making decisions which are very peculiar to your culture. So, and I think if you can create that context, in context of a deal, in context of a delivery, in context of work, very little of that answer will happen. And going back earlier, like Shelja mentioned that she's seeing 80% footfall. In fact, within Waymo, we have hybrid working, which is not mandated, it's flexible. Even still, we are seeing footfall. Because we are at a stage where if there is a account or a deal or anything that has to be won, there's an entire might of the organization that is coming to solve for it. Or we are still at a stage where we are building engineering practices, our capability practices. So that why is very clear to employees. So I don't see culture as a very on the board, cannot be felt kind of a concept. I really feel the one skill that has become really important is for leaders to play that balancing act between the two extremes. So it is more about the polarities, that how do you
bring them together?
How do you bring them together? And in today's context, it has become a very, very important skill. It's a very important competencies, and one has to focus on developing that. Telling a manager how you can be empathetic and still drive actions. Listen and still drive clarity.
All of this still sounds that we are talking about going back to the status quo as we experienced it and improve on that from the lessons that we have learned through this thing.
Making better of the choices.
I mean, that is the reality, right?
We have a choice and we should,
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no going beyond that. So have you all thought of anything now? Obviously, this was a big wake-up call that everything that we did, really nothing of that was very relevant. I mean, we had disaster recovery systems for our data, but we had no disaster recovery systems for where we worked or how we took care of our people. So within that, are you all investing at an individual level, organization level, in something which No, nobody has tried before. Have you, are you going into that area?
So I don't know whether you've like
something innovative.
Something innovative.
Because everyone else would have heard everything.
Yeah.
So let me
go ahead.
Yeah. So let me talk about a couple of things in terms of learning systems or learning and development programs. So initially, yes, we had classroom training, and then we had virtual labs where people could either take problem statements and do that, and kind of work on that. So now what we kind of, our learning programs are bite-sized. So say for example, we did a construct of a program which is problem solving skills, and it has 7 steps. So first what we actually did was we gave kind of reading material and said step 1, go read. Then step 2 was actually what we called a deep dive session, where at the end of the day we built a case study around that and all 7 steps. So the step 2 was they actually came in on a virtual session, and they actually kind of broke that problem down, and they kind of all discussed that, kind of for a particular live situation or a live case. So what we did was we had self-study, we had a virtual session, and then what we're doing is a 1.5-day boot camp, where it is now going to bring all the 7 steps together, and we're going to give them really tough cases and see how each of the cohorts actually works through it. So the fact that the toughest skill, which is problem solving skill, we've used everything. We've used self-study, we used kind of virtual sessions, now we're using live sessions. So there's a modification. They're digital, but it's bite-sized. So we've kind of used all resources that we have. So that is one. The second part of it is learning, which is gamification of it. So we've kind of looked at different certifications as well as courses, etc. And we said, go take those courses. Then second part of it is you have to work on a capstone project, you get certified by a mentor. Third part of it is that you go and take a metal or an SHL test with a higher level of proficiency. So each of that gets a star. And then we kind of say the next level role, is a 4-star role. So you need to get so many stars in so many capabilities to actually do this. So what is kind of happening is that is work in progress, but the gamification of that is pushing people to adopt, and go and say, I want to sign up for this course, I want to become a GCP consultant, and therefore there are these portfolio of experiences I need to go through if I have to get these stars and be eligible for this role. So there are things like that we're experimenting with, but again, not crack the code.
Right. So I'll give you one example, and I'll make it quick because for the sake of time. Yeah. So we did design thinking workshops across. In fact, I led the effort across Asia Pacific, Japan, including teams in India, Japan, Australia, again, to really see what is it that employees want, and had a very simple question: what is that one thing that we should do to become a great workplace, right? And we had our notions as to how the employees will respond. And through these design thinking workshops, it was so interesting to know that wellness was rated number 1. Well-being came out number 1. And most of the employees talked about that the managers who talk about wellness, well-being, and drive prioritization for well-being is really, really valued. So, and again, we had not thought that this will come out. Second that came out was sabbatical program, which is not given for a course or learning, but after you have crossed 2 years for rejuvenation and revitalization, so that you're investing in self and becoming whole. Learning budgets came out, another area.
Exactly.
And there's a conception that startups need not invest in benefits, right? But courtesy, because we saw the impact in pandemic, proactive and preventive healthcare, all these things are becoming extremely important even for younger employees. They are looking at the benefit covers and seeing whether the dependent parents are covered or not, what kind of illnesses are covered, and we will remember in the pre-pandemic period, the HR team will drive so much education sessions for the enrollment period, right? But I think some of these things these softer elements of what engages an employee to the workforce and where they want the organization to invest in them and the choice they want. They didn't ask for programs, they asked for learning budget. So these were the few things
and
that...
I think that I love the aspect about wellness because, you know, one of the things that we've experimented with is that we have a tie-up with this agency which actually provides, I would say, parent care, if you will, or dependent
Elder
care, in a completely different city in which you are not. So we have a lot of our employees who took global mobility, who actually tied up and said we want to tie up with these people so that we have first responders on the ground, you know, where our parents are, and I'm sitting in San Francisco and I have somebody in Bangalore.
So to summarize our session, I think everything else has been done and dusted. I'm probably going to be repetitive over sessions, but I think we have those two foundational pillars. One where we've been always task oriented, productivity and performance oriented, and then the relationship pillar. It's high time that maybe they remain separate and distinct. That relationship is not a follow out of how well you do at your work. Yes, that is necessary, but the relationship that we create to inspire and create stickiness, that's beyond these challenges. Maybe that is something which can take us, even if this was an audition, to take us through the future evolutionary changes where species remains connected, wants to be connected, beyond just the digital persona. So any questions to from the audience? Is there somebody at the back? Oh, okay. So apparently we are back on the timeline, so we are unable to take any questions. Our apologies. The lady who stood up, maybe we can connect.
Maybe, you know, connect during the break or anything, if that works.
We are running slightly behind schedule, so if you don't mind, our speakers are going to be around, so if you'd like to take that offline, we'd appreciate that. On that note, please give them a big round of applause. We'd like to thank Sadhana, Sashi and Shailaja for sharing all that knowledge.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASScom YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.